It was just another busy morning at the bakery, until a small, wet nose appeared among the bread loaves. Chaos erupted, but what happened next would change everyone's morning, and their hearts. The morning sun had just begun to stretch its golden fingers across the small town of Willowbrook. In the heart of its busy main street, Dulce Bakery hummed with its usual energy. Ovens ticking, mixers whirring, and the chatter of early customers filling the warm, yeasty air. Bakers hustled behind the counters, icing pastries, arranging croissants, and ensuring that every display looked perfect. The scent of fresh bread intertwined with the earthy aroma of roasted coffee beans, a combination that always seemed to make the day brighter. Clara, the bakery's lead baker, was arranging a fresh batch of sourdough loaves when she heard it, a faint, irregular tapping at the back door. She frowned, thinking perhaps it was a delivery delay or one of the apprentices fumbling with supplies. But then came another sound, soft yet persistent. A sniff, a scuffle, a small paw dragging against the wooden floor. Her heart skipped a beat. Clara had grown up near the outskirts of the nearby forest, so she knew bears were native to the region, though encounters in town were rare. Still, the idea of one wandering into a crowded bakery seemed almost impossible. She motioned to Luis, the assistant baker, and whispered, "Check the back. Don't let anyone see if it's what I think it is." Luis hesitated but stepped carefully through the back door. The sun glinted off the glass, and as he peeked around the corner, his eyes widened. There, at the threshold of the kitchen, stood a small bear cub. Its fur was damp from the morning mist, its ears perked up in curiosity, and its eyes, round and dark, scanned the new environment with cautious wonder. The cub took a tentative step forward, sniffing the air filled with sugar, flour, and coffee. A tray of freshly baked croissants sat too close to its path, and with a small swipe of its paw, one slid across the counter and tumbled onto the floor. Luis stifled a gasp, both from fear and awe. Clara emerged from behind the bread display, trying to control the rising panic. "It's just a cub," she whispered, more to herself than to Luis. But even as she said it, her mind raced. What if the mother is nearby? What if it panics? The cub took another step forward, drawn by the scent of warm pastries. It nudged a small pile of muffins, sending them scattering, and let out a soft whine. Clara froze. There was no aggression in its behavior, only curiosity and a hint of anxiety. She realized that the cub was lost, separated from its family. Her chest tightened at the thought. How many times had she baked bread for families who were together, only to see this little one entirely alone? Meanwhile, the customers had begun to notice the commotion. A man with a newspaper froze mid-turn, coffee cup in hand. A young mother pulled her toddler closer, whispering reassurances, while an elderly couple in the corner leaned forward, eyes wide with astonishment. The cub, undeterred by the attention, shuffled closer to the edge of the display counter, its nose twitching as it sniffed at the sweet, flaky aroma. Clara knew she had to act quickly but carefully. Luis blocked the door gently. "Don't make any sudden movements," she instructed, moving slowly toward the cub. She kept her voice soft, almost soothing, hoping to prevent panic. The cub's ears flicked in her direction, and for a moment, it froze, studying her. She crouched slightly, lowering herself to appear less threatening, and held out her hands not to touch but to seem approachable. The cub's nose twitched again, and it inched forward, sniffing at her fingers. A small, accidental cough from a customer made it step back, knocking over a basket of bread. The sound of rolling rolls and scattered crumbs echoed through the bakery. Clara's heart pounded, and she instinctively called out, "Easy, easy, we're not going to hurt you." Luis whispered from the corner, "Should we call animal control?" Clara shook her head. "Not yet. We can't just trap it. It's scared. We need to calm it first. Observe it." She glanced at the cub, who was now sitting on its haunches near a pile of muffins, eyes wide and unblinking. The morning continued with a strange mixture of chaos and quiet observation. Customers whispered among themselves, some taking cautious photos, others stepping back, giving the cub space. Clara grabbed a small piece of bread from the counter and slowly moved it toward the cub. At first it didn't move. Then, after a tense moment, it sniffed the bread and gently took it with its tiny jaws. A collective sigh of relief filled the bakery. For a moment, it seemed as if the world had paused, all attention fixed on this small creature and the delicate dance of trust unfolding between human and animal. But Clara knew the cub couldn't stay. Even if it seemed harmless now, a full-grown bear could pose serious danger. She had to figure out how to reunite it with its family, and fast. The thought of the cub wandering into the streets or near traffic made her stomach churn. She needed a plan, but first she needed information. How long had it been alone? Was the mother nearby? How could she lead it safely back without frightening it? Luis, ever the practical one, whispered, "Maybe we can guide it outside slowly, like a trail of food?" Clara nodded. "Yes, but gently. We can't rush it. We need to move calmly or we risk frightening it." She surveyed the bakery, mentally noting exits, obstacles, and the cub's current attention. The challenge was enormous. Keeping it calm, preventing harm to customers, and ensuring the cub eventually returned to the wild. Suddenly the cub's ears perked up. A distant sound, perhaps a whistle or a low growl, echoed faintly from the street. The cub froze, standing rigid, sniffing the air. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Was that the mother? Or a dog? She could see the tension in its body, ready to bolt. "Stay calm," she murmured. She grabbed another small piece of bread, holding it out like a tiny peace offering, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The cub hesitated, then inched forward again, drawn by the familiar scent of food and Clara's calm presence. Customers held their breath. Every footstep, every whisper, seemed magnified in the silent anticipation. This moment, fleeting yet eternal, hung on the fragile trust between human and cub. Clara knew that one wrong move could end everything. Then, as she prepared to guide the cub toward the back door, a loud crash came from the front of the bakery. A stack of chairs had toppled, whether by accident or nervous animal, she didn't know. The cub froze, its tiny body tense, eyes wide with fear. And then, it bolted, not toward the back but straight toward the main entrance heading into the busy street. Chaos erupted. Customers shouted, trying to dodge out of the way. Clara ran after it, heart pounding, yelling for calm as she gestured toward the side alley. Luis grabbed a broom, not to hit, but to gently steer the cub away from danger. And just as the cub reached the street, a shadow moved from the sidewalk, a larger bear, barely visible among the morning light. Clara froze. The mother? What would happen next? The bakery, the cub, the staff, and the customers, all held in a suspended moment, the town's morning forever changed by the unexpected visitor. If you were Clara, would you risk your own safety to guide a lost cub back to the wild? Or would you call for help immediately? The cub's tiny paws patted urgently on the cobblestones as Clara and Luis followed, weaving between startled pedestrians and overturned bicycles. The early morning sun cast long shadows on the street, highlighting the contrast between the bustling human world and the vulnerable animal navigating it. Clara's heart pounded with fear and responsibility. She could see that the cub was scared, confused, and utterly unprepared for the chaos of town life. Every corner, every sudden noise, shouts from vendors, car horns, the squeal of tires, made it flinch, sending adrenaline surging through Clara and Luis as well. The baker instinctively raised her voice, trying to calm the onlookers. "Everyone stay back. Give it space. We're trying to keep it safe." Her words were drowned out by the cacophony of traffic and human panic, but a few attentive customers moved aside, understanding that the cub's fragile trust depended on distance and calm. Clara's mind raced. She needed to lead it to somewhere safe, somewhere away from busy streets and potential harm. The narrow alley beside the bakery seemed ideal, but the cub had other plans. Suddenly, it darted toward the marketplace, where vendors were setting up their stalls for the morning rush. Apples rolled across the pavement, crates of bread teetered precariously, and chickens squawked in their coops. The cub sniffed everything eagerly, oblivious to the chaos it caused, while Clara sprinted after it, shouting instructions to Luis and anyone willing to listen. She grabbed a stray rope from a nearby cart, hoping to gently guide the cub if needed, but she knew any sudden move could frighten it further. In the midst of the pandemonium, a mother with her child froze at the sight of the cub, her hand instinctively shielding her toddler. Clara approached cautiously. "It's just a cub. Please give it space," she said, trying to inject calm into her tone. The mother nodded, eyes wide but trusting, stepping back to let the cub continue its path. Luis, meanwhile, had noticed a pattern. The cub seemed to be moving toward the park at the edge of town, a small green space where trees clustered near a fountain. "It wants the park," he shouted over the noise. "Follow it slowly." Clara nodded. The idea of leading it somewhere familiar and safe gave her a fragile hope. They moved carefully, creating a human buffer around the cub. The town's residents, sensing the gravity of the moment, formed a loose corridor, guiding the cub toward safety without touching or startling it. But just as the cub reached the fountain, it froze, ears flicking, tail tensing. Clara followed its gaze and saw a movement at the tree line. A larger figure, massive yet graceful, emerged, a bear, likely the cub's mother. Her fur glistened in the sunlight, and her eyes, sharp and watchful, studied the chaotic scene before her. The cub whined softly, then took a tentative step forward. Clara's pulse quickened. She had grown up understanding bear behavior, but observing it up close in an urban environment was entirely different. The mother bear didn't approach aggressively. Instead, she moved carefully, her body language signaling caution and curiosity. Clara realized that both cub and mother were evaluating each other and the humans between them. Any sudden action could provoke fear or a defensive response. "Stay calm," Clara whispered to the bystanders. She crouched low, hands visible but not reaching, and spoke softly. The cub edged closer to its mother, testing the boundaries. Luis kept his distance, offering reassurance with gentle gestures. The townspeople watched silently, understanding that interference could jeopardize the reunion. The mother bear stepped closer, sniffing the air, her gaze briefly flicking to Clara. In that moment, Clara felt a strange connection, a shared understanding across species. She realized that fear was mutual, but so was the desire to protect and care. The cub nudged against the mother's paw, and she responded with a gentle nudge back, a silent affirmation that everything would be okay. But safety was fragile. A car engine roared nearby, startling the cub. It bolted toward the street, heading back in the direction of the bakery. Clara ran after it, calling softly, trying to redirect its path. The mother followed, cautious but ready to defend her cub if necessary. The townspeople moved out of the way, some clutching phones, others frozen in awe. A sudden scream pierced the morning air. A child had wandered too close to the cub's path. Clara's heart lurched. She darted between the child and the cub, waving her arms, guiding both to safety. The mother bear paused, scanning the new development. Clara knew she had to maintain control, not by force but by calm leadership. "Focus on calm," she muttered to Luis. "We can't let panic spread." They slowly guided the cub and mother toward a quieter alleyway lined with small shrubs and benches, a temporary haven until animal control or wildlife experts could arrive. The cub, sensing the reduced chaos, slowed its pace, following Clara's subtle cues. The town held its breath as the trio disappeared from the busy streets, leaving behind a mixture of awe, relief, and unanswered questions. The bakery, once a scene of chaos, now felt strangely empty, as if the morning's extraordinary events had paused time. Clara leaned against a wall, hands trembling while Luis caught his breath. But even as the adrenaline faded, Clara knew the story wasn't over. How would they reunite the cub fully with its mother? Would the mother bear trust humans enough to lead them to safety? And what would happen if the cub got separated again in the busy streets of Willowbrook? Her mind raced with possibilities. Every decision now could ripple into consequences far beyond what she could predict. She had learned, in those frantic minutes, that empathy often required action under pressure, that trust could be fragile, and that even small creatures could command the attention and respect of an entire town. As she turned back toward the bakery to check on any remaining customers, she heard a distant growl, not threatening but deep and resonant, a reminder that the mother bear was near and attentive. Clara froze. Something was moving near the alley's edge, and it wasn't the cub. If you were a bystander witnessing a lost cub and its protective mother in a busy town, how would you act? Step back, intervene, or call for help? The alley stretched like a hidden artery behind Willowbrook's main street, a mixture of cracked pavement, scattered trash bins, and stray cardboard boxes leaning against brick walls. For Clara, it was both a relief and a worry. Relief because it offered a temporary refuge for the cub and its mother, away from honking cars and panicked crowds. Worry because it was narrow, chaotic, and unpredictable. Any misstep could trigger fear, panic, or worse, a confrontation with something unfamiliar. The cub, still small and damp from the morning dew, hesitated at the entrance. It glanced back at the mother, who nudged it gently forward with a low rumble that was more reassuring than intimidating. Clara and Luis followed cautiously, creating a human buffer but keeping a safe distance. They had learned quickly that proximity had to be balanced with respect. The cub's trust was fragile, and the mother's protective instincts were keen. "Slow and steady," Clara whispered to Luis. Her voice was calm, almost meditative, a sharp contrast to the chaos of earlier. The cub's ears flicked in her direction as if acknowledging the guidance. She felt a rush of both awe and fear. These moments required intuition, patience, and careful observation, more than any textbook or wildlife manual could provide. The alley widened slightly, leading to a small courtyard where sunlight filtered through gaps between buildings. Here, Clara spotted potential hazards: a rusted metal gate, uneven cobblestones, and the occasional discarded bottle. She motioned to the cub, encouraging it to move past the obstacles slowly. The cub sniffed the ground, ears alert, occasionally swiping at a floating leaf or stray piece of paper. Each cautious movement underscored the delicate balance of fear and curiosity that defined its every action. Luis pointed toward the corner, where a pile of wooden crates formed a makeshift barrier. If we can guide them behind those crates, it'll give them a bit of cover before we try to get them to the park, he suggested. Clara nodded, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of the mother bear's further concerns. The mother had paused near a dumpster, her dark eyes observing, calculating, ready to intervene if she sensed danger. The cub finally began moving toward the crates, tiny paws patting softly against the rough alley stones. Clara kept her movements minimal, voice low and rhythmic, offering quiet reassurances. The mother followed closely behind, moving with a grace that belied her size, protective yet patient. Clara couldn't help but marvel at the bond between the two. It was instinctual, raw, and precise, a lesson in empathy and responsibility that humans often struggle to emulate. Suddenly, a sound broke the cautious calm, the metallic clatter of a trash can lid falling over. The cub froze, ears perked, eyes wide with fear. Clara instinctively raised her hands in a calming gesture. It's okay, she murmured. Luis mirrored her movements, stepping slowly toward the cub without making contact, creating a corridor of reassurance. The cub inched forward, following the mother's subtle guidance, and the temporary panic subsided. As they progressed, Clara noticed a small group of curious residents peeking from nearby windows. Some whispered advice, others held cameras, but she gestured with her hands to maintain silence. The cub's safety depended on minimal human interference. One wrong sound or sudden gesture could undo all the trust painstakingly built in the last hour. A soft breeze carried the aroma of pastries from the bakery back into the alley. The cub's nose twitched, a faint reminder of the strange intersection of worlds it now inhabited, wild instinct navigating human territory. Clara smiled faintly to herself. It was surreal, a dance of two realities intersecting, the comfort and chaos of town life with the instinctual, unrefined world of a bear family. They reached the edge of the courtyard, where a narrow passage led to the park's edge. Clara knew this was the last stretch before relative safety. She glanced at the mother bear, who had stopped, muscles tensed, observing every movement from the humans around. The cub, unaware of the strategic pause, shuffled forward, sniffing curiously at the sunlit ground. Then came an unexpected complication. A delivery truck backed into the alley, oblivious to the scene unfolding. Its engine roared, sending vibrations across the cobblestones. The cub froze, a high-pitched squeal escaping its tiny throat. Clara's stomach tightened. The mother growled softly, a sound deep and warning, signaling both protection and agitation. "Quick, we need to guide them out," Clara whispered urgently. She grabbed a small piece of bread from her pocket, a tactic that had worked earlier, and held it low to the ground, hoping the cub would follow. Luis moved to the side, signaling to the driver to pause, waving frantically but carefully not to startle the animals further. The cub sniffed the bread, then hesitated, muscles tense. The mother stood still, observing the humans and the truck simultaneously. Clara felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. Every second mattered. One wrong move, one sudden noise, could trigger a flight or defensive reaction. She kept her hands steady, voice calm, and heart focused on guiding them both to the park. Slowly, deliberately, the cub began to move toward the bread, tentative but motivated. The mother followed, their movements synchronized, a rhythm born of trust and instinct. Clara and Luis mirrored them, careful not to encroach but ready to intervene if necessary. The truck idled silently, the driver finally understanding that he was part of an unusual rescue operation. Just as they neared the park entrance, a loud bark pierced the air, a dog chasing after a squirrel on the opposite side of the fence. The cub bolted instinctively toward the nearest hiding spot, a small maintenance shed partially obscured by shrubbery. Clara lunged forward, waving her arms to prevent it from bolting further into danger. The mother bear reacted instantly, positioning herself between the cub and any threat, eyes blazing with protective focus. Clara's heart hammered. She could see the cub trembling slightly, caught between curiosity and fear. The mother's body language was clear. "Stay calm, stay close, follow her lead." Luis whispered, "We can't get too close, but we can block escape routes and guide them." Clara nodded, weighing each movement carefully. The alley, chaotic as it had been, had led them here, and the park offered safety, but only if they navigated the final stretch with patience and precision. The cub's survival, and the mother's trust, depended on these next few moments. Then from behind the shrubs, a shadow shifted. Clara froze. Something, or someone, was watching them. Was it another person? Another animal? Or had someone followed them from the market earlier? The cub stiffened, ears flicking toward the shadow, tail bristling slightly. The mother growled softly, a low, controlled rumble warning any potential threat to stay back. Clara realized immediately, this was a critical point. One wrong move could undo the delicate trust and endanger both humans and bears. She took a deep breath, preparing herself for the unexpected, ready to act if necessary, but hoping the observer would remain unseen and harmless. If you were Clara and saw a potential threat near a lost cub and its mother, what would you do? Intervene, distract, or retreat? How would you protect both humans and animals? The park at the edge of Willowbrook felt like an oasis after the chaos of the streets. Small patches of grass and carefully tended flowerbeds lined the pathways, and a few benches sat under the shade of old oak trees. For Clara, it was a relief, but also a reminder that the urban environment was far from natural for a bear. The cub's tiny paws made soft crunching sounds against the gravel path as it cautiously followed the mother, sniffing every shrub and flower as if assessing whether it could find comfort here. Louise stayed a safe distance back, keeping an eye on curious passers-by while ensuring the cub had enough room. Clara moved slowly, hands visible, voice calm, echoing soft reassurances that were both for her own nerves and for the animals. The mother bear's dark eyes scanned the surroundings, body low but fluid, each muscle poised to protect her cub. Clara couldn't help but marvel at the instinctive coordination. The tiny cub's tentative steps mirrored the careful guidance of its mother. "Look over there," Louise whispered, pointing to a small grove of trees near the fountain. "It's a safe spot to pause and regroup." The cub hesitated for a moment but then, encouraged by the mother's subtle nudge, moved toward the grove. Clara noticed the relief in its movement, the tiny flick of its ears relaxing. The mother followed, positioning herself between the cub and any potential threats, a living shield of care and instinct. As they reached the grove, Clara saw that some townspeople had gathered at the park's edge, watching from a distance. Parents held children close, shopkeepers leaned on benches, and a few had discreetly taken photos. Clara raised her hands to indicate that they should stay back. "Give them space," she instructed softly, "the cub needs calm and quiet." But the situation was far from resolved. The cub had now paused near a cluster of shrubs, sniffing the ground with anxious curiosity. Clara knelt slightly, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She reached for another small piece of bread, setting it on the ground at a safe distance from her, hoping to entice the cub forward without startling it. Slowly the cub approached, sniffing cautiously before nibbling at the bread. The mother watched intently, her stance rigid but non-aggressive. Clara realized how delicate the balance was. One wrong sound, one sudden gesture could trigger panic. She whispered to Louise, "We need to think about the next step. The cub can't stay here forever. We have to reunite it fully with its mother and then ensure they leave the town safely." Just as Clara finished her thought, a uniformed figure appeared at the park entrance. It was Officer Ramirez, the town's animal control liaison. His eyes widened at the scene, a cub and its mother cautiously navigating the park, guided by two humans who had remained calm under extreme pressure. Clara gave him a subtle nod, explaining softly, "We're trying to keep them calm. Don't make any sudden moves." Officer Ramirez nodded, understanding immediately. He moved slowly, hands raised, signaling for the few curious bystanders to step back. Clara and Luis remained behind the cub, maintaining the human buffer, while Ramirez subtly positioned himself to prevent the animals from wandering toward busy streets again. The mother bear, now sensing a potential barrier of safety and control, allowed the cub to nibble at the bread while keeping her posture protective but relaxed. Clara noted how trust was being extended, first to humans who had shown calm and care, then to the environment of the park, which was quieter and less threatening than the streets. But then came another complication. A dog from a nearby residence, unleashed for a morning walk, bounded into the park, barking excitedly. The cub's head shot up, ears flat, tail twitching, while the mother's growl rolled deep and warning across the park. Clara and Officer Ramirez froze, calculating their next move. Any sudden motion could provoke the bears, but inaction risked escalation. Clara's mind raced. She remembered her training, her childhood experience with local wildlife, and the guidance she had received over the years. "Luis," she whispered, "calm the crowd, keep them away from the dog. We can't let it get closer." Luis quickly moved to intercept, gently corralling the dog and its owner back toward the path, reassuring them to remain calm and quiet. The cub, sensing that the immediate threat had been mitigated, edged closer to the mother, who nudged it gently. Clara held her breath, aware that the final step, full reunion and safe exit, was still ahead. She could see Officer Ramirez subtly signaling another patrol officer to prepare for assistance if necessary. The tension in the park was palpable. Townspeople, once curious and chaotic, now held their collective breath in quiet awe, witnessing a rare, unspoken moment of trust and connection between human and animal. Clara realized that empathy was at work here, not just hers or the staff's but the mothers, the cubs, and even the humans who had stayed calm. As the sun climbed higher, the cub began to explore the grove more confidently, sniffing near the fountain, swiping at fallen leaves. The mother watched every movement, occasionally nudging the cub back toward Clara's gentle guidance. Clara, aware of the delicate timing, whispered to Officer Ramirez, "We need to create a corridor to guide them out of town safely toward the forest edge." But before they could act, a sudden noise erupted nearby, a garbage truck backing up along the park perimeter. The cub froze, eyes wide, and the mother growled sharply. Clara felt her heart leap into her throat. Any sudden movement or panic could undo all progress. She moved instinctively, crouching lower, spreading her arms in a calm, open gesture. Luis echoed her movements, maintaining a quiet presence while signaling to Ramirez to contain the perimeter. The cub, torn between fear and curiosity, inched toward Clara's extended hands, drawn by the scent of bread and reassurance. The mother, sensing her cub's hesitation, positioned herself strategically between the threat and the cub. Clara whispered softly, "Almost there, stay calm." And then, just as the cub seemed ready to follow the path toward the safer forest corridor, the mother's gaze shifted sharply. Clara turned slowly, her stomach tightening, and saw a shadow moving through the trees, larger, unfamiliar, and potentially dangerous. The cub froze mid-step, tail bristling. The mother growled deeply, muscles rippling, ready to defend. Clara knew that this could escalate in an instant, that one wrong reaction could send the cub bolting into town streets again or worse. The park, once a sanctuary, had suddenly become a stage for an unforeseen threat, testing every ounce of patience, observation, and courage Clara and Luis had gathered over the morning. If you were guiding a lost cub and its mother toward safety, and an unknown potential threat appeared, what would you do? Stand your ground, retreat, or try to distract it? How would you protect both the animals and humans? The forest edge was just beyond the park, a fringe of towering pines and dense underbrush that promised safety and familiarity to the cub. Clara could see it now, the sanctuary that would return the cub to the life it was meant to lead. But the path between the park and the forest was narrow, bordered by streets, sidewalks, and small fences. Any misstep could provoke panic either from the cub, its mother, or even nearby townspeople who had gathered to watch the unfolding scene. The mother bear paused at the park's perimeter, muscles coiled in readiness. The cub clung close, ears flicking nervously, its small paws shuffling against the gravel. Clara moved slowly, her hands raised in soft, calming gestures. She whispered to Luis, "We need to make this a straight path, minimize distractions. Step by step." Luis nodded, signaling to Officer Ramirez to coordinate a quiet perimeter along the edges, preventing onlookers or stray animals from startling them further. The cub inched forward, drawn by a trail of small pieces of bread Clara had left strategically along the path. The mother followed, body tense but fluid, every muscle poised for protection. Clara's chest tightened with anticipation. Every step toward the forest was critical, every moment a test of trust. A sudden sound shattered the quiet, the screech of brakes from a passing car just beyond the park's fence. The cub froze, tail bristling, eyes wide with alarm. The mother growled, low and rumbling, a clear warning to both the humans and the intruding noise. Clara crouched low, voice calm and steady, "It's okay, stay with me, you're almost there." Luis, agile and quick-thinking, moved toward the fence line, waving hands slowly to block the cub's attention from the commotion. Officer Ramirez stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to assert control over the few startled bystanders without creating additional noise. The delicate choreography of guidance, patience, and observation was everything now. The cub took a tentative step forward, then another, drawn by both Clara's calm presence and the scent of bread. The mother stayed close, watching each movement with a precise and protective gaze. Clara noticed something profound. The cub's trust was extending not just to its mother, but to the humans who had approached carefully, calmly, empathetically. They reached the end of the park path, where a narrow strip of sidewalk led to a small wooden bridge spanning a drainage channel. The cub hesitated again, ears twitching at the unfamiliar sound of water flowing beneath. The mother nudged it gently forward, rumbling softly as if conveying this way it's safe. Clara knelt, spreading her hands and speaking softly. Just a little more, almost there. She left a few pieces of bread along the bridge, creating a subtle trail to guide the cub. It sniffed at each piece, stepping carefully, while the mother followed with measured steps, eyes never leaving her child. But even as the cub advanced, Clara noticed movement from the shadowed edge of the trees, a second figure. At first, she thought it was another observer, perhaps a curious hiker or a child who had wandered too close. But as it emerged into a slant of sunlight, her stomach dropped. A larger, older bear, unfamiliar, massive, stood just inside the treeline. Its eyes were locked on the mother and cub. Clara froze, heart hammering. The mother's body tensed instantly, a low growl vibrating from deep within her chest. The cub froze in place, unsure whether to proceed or retreat. Every instinct Clara had screamed caution. This was the moment where misjudgment could trigger a dangerous confrontation. Luis whispered urgently, "Is that another mother bear?" Or... He didn't finish. The uncertainty hung in the air, heavy and electric. Clara understood instinctively. The cub must not panic, the mother must feel secure, and humans must remain neutral, calm observers. Clara crouched lower, speaking softly, almost inaudibly, "Steady, calm, follow the trail." She extended her hands subtly, fingers pointing toward the forest edge, a silent invitation to continue. The cub sniffed at the final piece of bread, small paws trembling. The mother growled once more, directing attention toward Clara and Luis with a tense but protective posture. The unknown bear shifted but made no aggressive move, its posture neutral, observing. Clara realized that tension alone had created a fragile standoff. One sudden move, one loud noise, and the entire scenario could explode. She whispered to Ramirez, "Keep everyone quiet. No sudden movements. Let nature decide for a moment." The cub's tiny nose twitched, sniffing along the bridge trail. The mother followed, muscles rippling, ready to shield her child. Clara and Luis stayed just behind, guiding subtly, hearts pounding. The forest edge was within sight now. Trees, shadow, undergrowth, and a sense of relief began to bubble in Clara's chest, tempered by caution. Then came another challenge. The cub slipped slightly on a wet plank of the bridge, squealing softly. The mother reacted instantly, stepping closer, nudging the cub firmly but carefully to regain balance. Clara held her breath. It was a reminder of how fragile every moment was, how delicate the trust between mother, cub, and humans had become. A small child from a nearby park bench, drawn by curiosity, squeaked and pointed at the cub. Clara's instincts kicked in and she stepped swiftly but quietly between them, spreading her arms to block sight lines without startling anyone. The mother growled low, reassuring the cub while warning others. Luis motioned the child's parent to gently remove them from the edge, maintaining calm control. The cub, heart pounding, took a final step onto solid ground at the forest's fringe. The mother followed, eyes scanning for threats one last time. Clara and Luis exhaled softly, adrenaline slowly ebbing. The unknown bear in the treeline lingered for a tense moment before retreating into the shadows, leaving mother and cub alone at the forest's welcoming edge. Clara knelt low, watching them disappear into the trees. She felt awe and relief simultaneously, the morning's chaos resolving into quiet triumph. She had witnessed empathy, trust, and patience intersect with raw instinct and urban reality. The cub's survival had depended on every careful step, every gentle gesture, and the understanding that humans could coexist cautiously but compassionately with nature. But even as the forest swallowed the mother and cub from view, Clara realized the story was not entirely over. She had glimpsed the fragility of trust, the delicate balance of instinct and intervention, and the responsibility humans bore when wildlife wandered into their world. How long would the mother allow humans to guide her cub if such events repeated? And would the town of Willowbrook remember this morning as a miracle, a warning, or a lesson? The next morning arrived cool and misty, with the scent of pine and wet earth seeping into every corner of the cabin. The Millers had developed a quiet rhythm, a subtle synchronization with the forest, anticipating the movements of their silent teacher. Even the children moved with restraint and care, aware that today, like every day the bear visited, observation would be the key to understanding. Lucy was the first to notice movement in the clearing. "They're here," she whispered, pointing toward the tree line. The adult bear stood at the edge, flanked by its cubs, each taking tentative steps forward. This time, however, the bear lingered differently. It remained slightly closer to the cabin, just far enough to maintain a safe distance, but near enough for the family to feel its weighty presence. Ben grabbed his notebook immediately, flipping to a fresh page. "It's testing us again," he murmured. "The proximity, it wants to see how we react under observation." Mrs. Miller nodded, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "It's a subtle lesson in composure. We've learned patience and awareness, now it's teaching restraint under pressure." The family continued their morning routines. They fetched water from the small barrel outside, swept the porch and checked the garden. Every movement was careful, deliberate, as if they were aware of the bear's watchful eyes in a way that transcended fear. The cubs watched the human actions curiously, mirroring their own small movements, learning from both the adult bear and the humans. Mr. Miller leaned against the door frame, observing silently. "Notice how the adult positions itself," he whispered. "It's not just protection, it's teaching spatial awareness. The cubs learn by watching its distance and timing, just as we're learning to respect its distance." Lucy's eyes followed the cubs as they explored the clearing. One tripped over a mossy log, stumbling forward, and the adult bear immediately adjusted its stance, stepping closer and guiding the cub with a gentle nudge. Lucy gasped softly. It's showing care without touching too much, just enough to guide." "Exactly," Ben said quietly. "It's teaching balance, when to intervene and when to let the learner discover on their own." The family moved slowly, aware that their own actions were also part of the lesson. Even small tasks, sweeping leaves, moving firewood, were performed with conscious care. The bear's watchful presence transformed ordinary chores into exercises in mindfulness, patience and mutual respect. Mid-morning brought an unexpected challenge. A sudden gust of wind shook the trees, sending a cascade of pine needles and branches into the clearing. The cubs froze, glancing toward the adult. Max barked sharply, startled by the sudden noise. The adult bear remained calm, its body language steady and composed. It moved deliberately between the cubs and the clearing, guiding them back to safety without panicking or reacting aggressively. Mrs. Miller whispered to the children, "Observe closely. The adult's calmness teaches the cubs to remain composed. Panic isn't instinctive, it's learned. And so is composure." Lucy's eyes widened. "So it's teaching us composure too?" "Yes," her mother replied softly. "Even in sudden chaos, awareness and patience allow us to act responsibly without harm." The bear's lesson continued as the family went about their midday tasks. The cubs began to mimic the adult's careful movements, exploring the edges of the clearing, sniffing the ground and testing boundaries. Every small step was intentional, every glance calculated. The Millers watched, absorbing the depth of the lesson unfolding before them. Ben jotted furiously in his notebook. "It's teaching observation, awareness, patience, restraint, everything we need to understand about responsibility." As afternoon approached, the adult bear shifted, moving closer to the cabin porch. The family froze, holding their positions, aware that even the smallest movement could alter the dynamics of this silent exchange. The bear stopped, sniffed the air and glanced at the family, holding its gaze for several long moments. Mr. Miller exhaled quietly. "It's acknowledging us now," he said. "We're not just observers, we're participants in the lesson. Our awareness, our restraint is being measured." Lucy whispered, "I think it's proud of us, in its own way." Mrs. Miller smiled. "Perhaps. But more importantly, it's teaching us that respect and awareness are reciprocal. Every action, every observation counts." The bear and cubs eventually retreated back into the forest, pausing at the tree line for a final glance. The family remained by the window, hearts pounding with the intensity of the unspoken dialogue they had just experienced. Silence settled over the clearing, heavy with meaning. The Millers gathered in the living room, reflecting on the lessons of the day. "We've seen patience, respect, and composure," Mr. Miller said. "Now we've seen guidance, subtle intervention, and the importance of timing." Lucy nodded slowly. It's teaching us about life. How to move through it carefully, thoughtfully, and with respect for others." Ben closed his notebook, satisfied. "And every day it shows us something new. I can't wait to see what comes next." As night fell, the forest around the cabin grew quiet. The bear's presence lingered in the Millers' minds, a constant reminder of the depth of the lessons being shared. Somewhere among the shadows, the adult bear waited, patient and watchful, ensuring that each encounter would continue to shape the family's awareness and understanding. The morning sun filtered through the canopy in thin golden shafts, illuminating the forest floor with a serene, almost ethereal glow. The Millers awoke to a calmness that felt different from previous days. A subtle expectation hung in the air, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Breakfast was quiet, each clink of cutlery echoing softly in the cabin, and even Max padded carefully by the window, his ears twitching toward the clearing. Lucy was the first to notice movement among the trees. The adult bear appeared again, flanked by its cubs, but this time, it remained completely still, almost statuesque at the edge of the clearing. Its eyes were fixed on the cabin, evaluating, waiting, measuring. The cubs, smaller and more playful than the day before, mirrored the adult's stillness, pausing mid-step as if sensing the importance of the moment. Ben leaned forward, gripping his notebook. "It's testing us again. The stillness, it's teaching patience. We can't rush this." Mrs. Miller nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's more than patience, it's attentiveness. Waiting without interference. Watching without judgment. That's what today is about." The Millers moved deliberately, performing their morning tasks with quiet precision. Watering the garden, sweeping the porch, and even feeding Max became exercises in careful awareness. Each step, each glance, was measured, conscious, as if they were part of a living experiment in patience and observation. The bear remained at the edge of the clearing for over an hour, its gaze unwavering. The cubs occasionally moved closer to the cabin, sniffing the air, but the adult's watchful presence ensured they did not cross boundaries. Lucy's fascination grew. "They're so still, yet so aware," she whispered. "It's like they're teaching us to do the same." "Exactly," Mrs. Miller replied softly. "Patience isn't about waiting idly, it's about observing, learning, and acting only when the time is right. That's what the bear is showing us." At mid-morning, a sudden rustle in the underbrush startled the family. A small deer leapt across the clearing and Max barked sharply. The cubs froze, and the adult bear immediately adjusted its stance, positioning itself between the cubs and the disturbance without aggression. Its body language conveyed calm control, teaching both cubs and humans the importance of measured response. Mr. Miller leaned against the doorframe, eyes fixed on the bear. "Notice how it reacts, not with panic, not with force, but with awareness. That's patience in action. That's composure under observation." Lucy nodded slowly. "So even when something unexpected happens, we can respond without fear if we stay aware." Ben scribbled furiously in his notebook. "It's subtle, but it's teaching timing. When to act, when to wait, when to observe." As the day progressed, the family continued their routines with deliberate care. Even simple tasks like tending the small vegetable garden became exercises in mindfulness. The bear's presence transformed ordinary actions into lessons of discipline, attentiveness, and patience. The cubs played quietly, testing boundaries, learning from the adult, and subtly teaching the Millers to mirror their careful observation. At one point, the adult bear shifted slightly closer to the porch. The family froze, understanding the gravity of the moment. The bear's stillness was no longer just observation. It was an invitation to demonstrate their understanding of patience. Every subtle movement of the Millers was being measured, noted in a silent dialogue that transcended words. Mrs. Miller whispered to Lucy, "Patience isn't passive. It's active awareness. Every glance, every step matters. The bear is showing us this in real time." Lucy watched, mesmerized as the cubs mirrored their parents' calm composure. One small cub stumbled over a log, paused, and looked back at the adult, who guided it with a subtle nudge. Lucy's eyes widened in understanding. It's not rushing the cub, it's letting it learn naturally. That's what we have to do too. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the clearing. The adult bear and cubs finally began to retreat, moving toward the forest edge. But before disappearing completely, the adult paused and looked back at the cabin. Its gaze was steady, expectant, and filled with a quiet intensity that left the Millers feeling both awed and challenged. Mr. Miller exhaled slowly. "It's testing us one last time today. Have we truly learned patience and composure, or do we still act impulsively?" Lucy whispered, I think we're learning." Ben closed his notebook with a satisfied sigh. Every day another lesson. And each one builds on the last. As night fell, the family gathered in the living room reflecting on the day. "Today was about more than observation," Mrs. Miller said. "It was about discipline, mindfulness, and understanding the timing of our actions. The forest has become our classroom and our teacher, silent, patient, and wise." Max curled up at the foot of the stairs, and the children whispered quietly about the lessons they had witnessed. Outside, the forest seemed almost alive, every rustle, every shadow carrying the weight of potential instruction. Somewhere in the trees, the adult bear lingered with the cubs, patiently waiting for the next day's lessons to unfold. The Millers knew with a deep certainty that their encounters were far from over. Each visit, each observation, each subtle action of the bear and its cubs carried meaning, lessons about patience, responsibility, awareness, and respect that could not be taught in a classroom or learned from a book. Lucy, finally settling under her blanket, whispered softly, "I wonder what lesson tomorrow will bring." Her words hung in the air, unanswered, yet charged with anticipation. The silent teacher in the forest had more to reveal, and the Millers were ready, hearts open, minds alert, and spirits attuned to the quiet guidance of the bear family. The morning air was sharp and clear, carrying the rich scent of pine, damp soil, and the faint aroma of wood smoke from the cabin stove. The Millers awoke with an unspoken anticipation. Over the past week, the forest had become a living classroom, and the bear family their patient instructors. Today, something in the stillness suggested a new lesson, a deeper layer of understanding waiting to unfold. Lucy was the first to notice movement at the edge of the clearing. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The adult bear and its two cubs emerged from the shadows, calm, deliberate, and unhurried. But today the adult moved closer than ever, pausing halfway across the clearing, eyes fixed on the cabin. The cubs mirrored the adult's calm, their small steps precise, almost ceremonial. Ben, notebook in hand, whispered, "It's different today, closer. I think it's testing trust." Mrs. Miller nodded quietly. "Yes. Patience and composure have been taught. Now it's about mutual trust, between the bears and us." The family carried out their morning routine with careful attention. Watering the garden, sweeping the porch, and feeding Max became exercises in intentionality. Every movement mattered. The bears' proximity magnified the importance of their actions, teaching that trust is built through consistent respect and mindfulness. Mr. Miller observed silently. "Notice how it watches not just the cubs but us too. Trust is reciprocal. We show respect and it shows confidence in our restraint. It's giving us room while measuring our awareness." Lucy's gaze followed a cub as it tentatively approached a patch of wildflowers near the porch. The adult bear's eyes tracked the movement, and it remained still, allowing the cub to explore while providing invisible guidance. Lucy whispered, "It trusts the cub, and us too." Ben scribbled in his notebook, capturing every subtle movement. "We're learning about trust, not control. Observation, guidance, patience, and now faith in each other's understanding." The day unfolded with subtle exercises in observation and restraint. The cubs explored more confidently, sometimes venturing closer to the cabin but never crossing the boundaries set by the adult. The Millers mirrored the bear's calm, moving slowly, consciously, aware that each step was an act of trust building. At mid-morning, a sudden noise, a snapping branch, caused Max to bark sharply. The cubs froze, and the adult bear immediately positioned itself between the clearing and the disturbance. Its posture was protective but not aggressive. The family watched, internalizing the lesson: trust does not negate vigilance. Safety and faith coexist, requiring awareness and careful judgment. Mrs. Miller whispered, "See that? Trust doesn't mean recklessness. It means understanding boundaries and responsibilities." Lucy's eyes widened. "So we can trust but we also stay aware?" "Exactly," her mother replied softly. "Trust requires observation, patience, and respect." The afternoon brought another subtle test. The adult bear moved closer to the porch while the cubs explored nearby. The family remained still, breathing slowly, aware that even small movements could influence the bear's perception of their reliability. The adult paused, locking eyes with Mr. Miller for several long moments. The silent communication was profound, a test of calm, consistency, and attentiveness. Mr. Miller exhaled slowly. "It's asking us, do we deserve trust? Will we respect its presence without taking liberties?" Lucy whispered, "I think we do. We've learned to be patient, aware, and careful." The cubs tumbled playfully near the edge of the clearing, occasionally glancing back at the adult, whose presence conveyed both authority and reassurance. The Millers observed quietly, understanding the complex interplay. The adult trusted them to act responsibly, while the cubs learned trust through observation. The family's awareness became part of the lesson, integrated seamlessly into the daily rhythm of coexistence. By late afternoon, the adult bear signaled the cubs to retreat toward the tree line. They moved slowly, deliberately, pausing to glance at the cabin before disappearing into the shadows. The adult lingered at the clearing's edge for a final long gaze, eyes heavy with unspoken acknowledgement. Mrs. Miller whispered, "Trust is built slowly. It's earned through patience, composure, and respect. Today they've shown us that trust can exist across species. Lucy smiled softly. I feel like we're part of their world even for a little while. Ben nodded, closing his notebook. We've learned patience, observation, composure, and now trust. What's next? Night descended over the cabin, bringing with it a serene silence. The forest seemed alive yet calm, every rustle of leaves a gentle reminder of lessons learned. Max lay curled at the foot of the stairs, the children whispered softly about the day, and the millers reflected on the invisible but powerful bonds forming between humans and bears. Somewhere beyond the shadows, the adult bear lingered with its cubs, watching, waiting, and preparing the next set of lessons. The family knew that each day brought deeper understanding, and that coexistence with patience, respect, and trust was a skill both humans and animals shared and nurtured together. How do you build trust in your own life, with family, friends, or even yourself? If a wild animal were silently teaching trust and respect, what lessons would you take away? The late afternoon sun slanted through the towering pines, illuminating the forest floor in golden patches. The cub, emboldened by hours of careful guidance and maternal instruction, ventured farther from the mother, pausing occasionally to sniff, paw, and observe. The mother bear remained a constant presence, vigilant yet unobtrusive, allowing the cub to learn through experience rather than interference. Clara and Luis, crouched at a respectful distance along a ridge, watched silently, absorbing the profound unfolding of instinct, trust, and growth. The forest seemed alive with quiet tests. Fallen branches crisscrossed paths, small pools of water reflected the filtered sunlight, and patches of moss covered uneven terrain. Each element provided the cub with lessons in balance, risk assessment, and cautious exploration. Clara marveled at the precision of maternal guidance, how the mother allowed freedom while remaining prepared to correct missteps without stifling learning. The cub approached a mossy incline, claws gripping roots, sniffing at the soil for stability. The mother nudged it gently, encouraging careful movement. Each paw step was deliberate, measured, a test of courage and judgment. Clara whispered to Luis, "This is the essence of survival, independence balanced with trust." Luis nodded, eyes wide with admiration for the natural teaching occurring before them. Suddenly, a subtle rustle broke the rhythm. From a nearby thicket emerged a small group of squirrels, chattering and bounding through the underbrush. The cub froze, tail flicking, ears alert. The mother growled low, a rumbling instruction that combined warning with reassurance. Clara held her breath. The cub, drawing from lessons learned all day, paused, assessed, and continued its cautious exploration, demonstrating both growing confidence and retained vigilance. Moments later, the cub discovered a shallow depression filled with leaves and pine needles. Curious, it pawed at the pile, sniffing and rearranging the debris. The mother observed closely, letting the cub experiment while remaining ready to step in if danger approached. Clara realized this was a profound moment of independent problem-solving, an essential milestone in the cub's development. From the ridge, Clara and Luis could see distant movement, another bear, larger and solitary, threading through the forest. The mother's posture stiffened slightly, signaling alertness. The cub instinctively pressed close, muscles tense but ready. Clara whispered, "Observation and instinct, they've internalized so much." Luis nodded, understanding that their human guidance had transitioned entirely into nature's domain. The cub then encountered a small stream, its water glinting with late sunlight. Carefully, it dipped a paw into the current, then another, testing depth and slipperiness. The mother stood beside, guiding subtly with nudges and soft rumbles. Clara noted the importance of these exercises. Water, terrain, and environmental challenges were real-world lessons the cub could not have learned in an urban setting. Suddenly, a sharp caw split the forest air. A hawk swooped overhead, wings cutting through sunlight. The cub froze, eyes wide, and the mother growled, a low, controlled warning. Clara's chest tightened. The cub needed to assess threat, maintain composure, and decide next steps. It hesitated, then, guided by maternal signals, crouched and moved behind a protective log, muscles coiled and ready. The mother nudged the cub again, communicating the importance of vigilance while maintaining calm. Clara marveled at the precision of the interaction. Trust, teaching, instinct, and survival condensed into these subtle movements. The cub now demonstrated patience, assessment, and careful decision-making, embodying the lessons of hours spent navigating from urban streets to the wild. Luis whispered, "It's incredible, every decision now comes from instinct shaped by guidance." Clara nodded, eyes fixed on the duo. She realized that empathy and patience had guided them this far, But the cub's final education was now entirely dictated by the forest's natural challenges. The cub then discovered a patch of wild berries, its small paws pawing gently at the branches. The mother watched, allowing the cub to experiment, teaching without words the value of caution, observation, and reward. Clara noted the subtle moral unfolding: curiosity tempered by guidance, independence shaped by experience, and trust earned through careful interaction. From their ridge, Clara and Luis saw the forest canopy shift with the wind. A distant deer darted past, leaves rustling, adding a note of tension. The cub paused, assessed, and then continued, demonstrating composure under uncertainty. The mother's low rumbles communicated reassurance and vigilance. Clara whispered, "Every moment here is a lesson in life: instinct, trust, observation." The afternoon shadows lengthened, casting long, intricate patterns on the forest floor. The cub ventured farther from the mother, testing boundaries, balancing risk with curiosity. The mother allowed more freedom while maintaining a protective presence, ready to correct missteps. Clara understood this as the culmination of all guidance provided that morning. The cub had internalized lessons in caution, curiosity, and independence. Then a rustling from deeper within the forest signaled the final challenge of the day. From the dense underbrush emerged a small bear cub, slightly older, approaching with curiosity but cautiousness. The mother's posture shifted, guarded but not aggressive, signaling a social learning opportunity. The original cub froze, tail bristling, then, encouraged by maternal guidance, stepped forward to interact. Clara held her breath, observing this critical moment of socialization. The cub had evolved from a lost, anxious wanderer into an independent, learning, confident being ready to navigate threats, opportunities, and social interactions. The mother's instruction had been subtle, deliberate, and profound. Luis whispered, "This is the real lesson, the culmination of everything we've guided them through." The late afternoon sun cast long golden rays through the trees, illuminating the forest floor in warm, dappled patterns. The cub, now far more confident, explored the clearing with a cautious but determined energy. Its movements were fluid, calculated, a balance of curiosity, observation, and instinct. The mother bear followed closely, still vigilant, but her posture conveyed trust and reassurance rather than constant guidance. Clara and Luis remained at a safe distance, crouched behind a thick grove of pines, absorbing the culmination of the day's lessons. The forest around them pulsed with life. Birds chirped intermittently, the creek gurgled softly over moss-covered stones, and the wind whispered through the canopy. Every sound, movement, and shift in the environment was both a challenge and an opportunity for the cub to practice the lessons instilled by its mother. Clara noted the profound beauty of the moment. Trust, patience, and empathy had guided them from an urban bakery to the heart of the wild, culminating in a living, breathing lesson in survival and independence. The cub approached a small, fallen tree that created a natural bridge over a shallow creek. Its tiny paws tested the surface, claws gripping the moss and bark, assessing stability and risk. The mother nudged it gently, a subtle reminder to focus, to measure each step. The cub paused, inhaled sharply, then carefully crossed, successfully navigating the obstacle. Clara whispered, "Every decision now comes from its own judgment, shaped by instinct and maternal guidance." A sudden rustling nearby caused the cub to freeze, tail bristling. Clara and Luis instinctively held their breath. From the dense underbrush emerged a fox, sleek and cautious, sniffing at the ground before moving along without noticing the cubs. The mother's body tensed briefly, then relaxed as the threat proved minimal. Clara marveled at the precision of the mother's instruction. Vigilance, caution, and composure had become ingrained in the cub. The original cub then approached the older cub that had appeared the previous block. The two sniffed each other, circled slowly, and engaged in tentative pawing, playful yet instructive. The mother observed, occasionally nudging or growling softly to maintain boundaries, ensuring the cubs learned social cues, respect, and collaboration without unnecessary risk. Clara realized this interaction was the pinnacle of all guidance so far. Environmental mastery, risk assessment, and social learning converged in a single, delicate moment. Luis whispered, "Look at the confidence. The cub's learning everything it needs to survive, and it's choosing every step." Clara nodded, reflecting on the role humans had played. Their intervention had been essential to move the cub from urban danger to forest safety, but the ultimate lessons, instinct, trust, socialization, belonged entirely to the bears. The cub ventured toward a patch of berries along the creek bank, pawing gently and sniffing. The mother bear watched, allowing independence while maintaining readiness to intervene if danger appeared. Clara noted the profound moral. Curiosity, patience and respect can coexist, guiding beings toward maturity without overstepping natural boundaries. A sudden movement in the underbrush drew the mother's attention. A deer bounded past, leaves rustling but without posing a direct threat. The cub froze instinctively, muscles coiled. The mother nudged it gently, conveying reassurance while reinforcing vigilance. Clara and Luis exchanged glances. This subtle guidance had created a cub that was confident, cautious, and capable, an animal ready to navigate the complexities of its natural world. The forest's rhythm continued, light shifting, wind whispering, and shadows lengthening. The mother led her cub to a small clearing where the terrain flattened, providing a temporary safe zone. Here the cub could experiment further, sniffing, pawing, climbing small mounds and interacting with the older cub. Each activity reinforced lessons of balance, observation and careful risk-taking. Clara realized the profound achievement. The cub's journey from lost urban wanderer to confident forest learner had been guided by patience, empathy and subtle human support. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows, Clara whispered, "This is it, the point of no interference. The cub has everything it needs now." Luis nodded silently, understanding the delicate balance between assistance and independence. Officer Ramirez, observing from a distance, ensured that no townspeople disrupted the final stage of the cub's education. The mother bear finally lay down on a soft patch of moss, allowing the cub a brief moment of rest. The cub nestled beside her, chest rising and falling with a sense of security and accomplishment. Clara felt a mixture of awe, relief, and humility. They had facilitated a journey of empathy and patience, but the final mastery, the cub's trust, judgment, and instinct, belonged to nature. A sudden rustle from the far end of the clearing signaled a subtle reminder. Life in the forest remained unpredictable. The cub lifted its head, sniffed, and assessed. Its muscles coiled briefly, then relaxed. The mother nudged the cub once, a final lesson in independence and composure. Clara recognized that these moments, uncertainty, risk, and assessment, would now shape the cub's future, guided only by instinct and maternal wisdom. As the forest grew quieter with the approaching evening, the mother and cub moved toward a dense thicket, preparing to disappear entirely from human observation. Clara and Luis remained at the edge, silent witnesses to the culmination of a journey that had begun with fear, uncertainty, and chaos, and now ended in confidence, trust, and skill. Clara whispered, "We step back now, completely. The forest will teach the rest." Luis exhaled slowly, a mixture of awe and reflection. They had guided, observed, and protected, but ultimately respect for nature required restraint. The cub's independence was secured, the mother's lessons complete, and the forest had reclaimed its own rhythms. After guiding an animal to safety, how far should humans step back to allow nature to take over? Can empathy and patience create lasting independence without interference?